As a general rule, to which there are absolutely no exceptions, commitment is not talent. Stand-up comedians are always trying to communicate to you their incredibly high level of commitment to the craft, commitment to the trade, commitment to the game. But this is kind of like a novelist communicating to you that they've got the highest level of commitment imaginable to finishing and publishing this book. And that's kind of irrelevant to the question of whether or not this book contains any new, original, or interesting ideas, whether or not you have skill in actually writing the narrative, or whether or not anyone is going to want to buy it or read it. 2024, there's a subtle and important distinction between the way stand-up comedians talk about themselves during their set on stage and in these various miscellaneous doomed podcasts. We have fucking 10,000 stand-up comedians with 10,000 podcasts, and really there isn't even one listener per podcast. Like, a lot of these podcasts have 0 listeners, but the comedians keep on producing these podcasts, and each comedian goes over and, has a supporting role appearing on someone else's podcast. It's this like endless cycle of self-justification through interviews and podcasts. Now, the dominant form on stage is a 7-minute set, a 5-minute set, and we have been to clubs where they are doing 3-minute sets. It's just crazy. So little time on stage. Nobody gets to really lay out their autobiography. But when you hear these podcasts, you hear stories like, this is a real story, a particular story. Here's stories about people who were laid off from their jobs, who were fired in effect, but who received a generous severance package. And they took this little bit of money that they had saved up, that had been granted by their employer, whether they were fired due to coronavirus or whatever. The company downsized for some reason. They lost their job. And they decided, I'm going to gamble it all on starting a new career in stand-up comedy. I'm going to take this money and I'm going to invest it in my own bright future as a stand-up comedian. Now, the thing is, when you meet and talk to these people, what they don't realize is they have invested in something that has a 100% chance of failure. Not 99%, 100%. If you define success as being able to afford your own rent in New York City, being able to pay the cost of rent in New York, New York, not the cost of rent in Bangkok, Thailand, not the cost of rent in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. No. In a big city in the Western world, there is absolutely zero chance that the money you have invested in stand-up comedy can ever pay your rent through the training, through the skill, the ability you develop in stand-up comedy. The only way to make money in stand-up comedy is to meet other talented people and get organized to produce an original product that sells, and that is by definition not stand-up comedy. I'm leaving out the names of who all these people are. But yeah, this particular woman I was thinking of there, and she is a beautiful woman who has that story about losing her job and getting the severance package. And when you're a beautiful woman, there are a lot of people around, especially in show business, who will tell you whatever it is you want to hear. I knew an ugly guy who didn't have that problem. Ugly guy with a funny accent, very distinctive manner of speech, very distinctive physicality, a lot of muscle mass on him. He did kung fu. The minute I met this guy, I'm talking to him and thinking, look, I could build a whole film project around this guy. We could have political satire. It's partly like a parody of kung fu movies. There's some of that physical humor, which this guy could do. But we can bring in all this material about Joe Biden and China, international politics. Obviously, this comedy I can write. This guy can't write that comedy, but he can read the lines I write, and I can write the part for him. I also have this background as a scholar of Buddhism, and I've studied all these languages. I've studied Chinese, I've studied Pali, I've studied Thai, Laotian, Cambodian, not a complete list. So, okay, I can use my background dealing with the politics, with this. I could write a film for this guy you know. Then you have a unique product, and it's something that at least potentially could generate money. It could sell. But no, this dude, like 100% of these other comedians who are 100% committed to the inevitability of their own failure, all he wants to do is repeat this confessional format of getting up on stage and acting like the audience is your therapist again and again and again. And no matter how good your act is, no matter how funny your lines are, you can never win. The only way to win in stand-up comedy in 2024, the only way to succeed, the only way to be able to pay your rent is to get organized with other stand-up comedians to do something really creative that is not stand-up comedy, that instead produces a product people can actually invest in, promote, and ultimately buy.